Welcome to Bits About Books, the home for conversations with authors of breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. Founders, entrepreneurs, and individual professionals, we all need to keep track of ideas that are helping create our today and tomorrow. Bits About Books will strive to find those books and speak to their authors, go behind the scenes and understand what inspired the authors to write the books that they did and how they went about doing so. Through our conversations, we hope to gain insights that will help us to get the most out of our efforts. I'm your host Shubhanjan Sarkar, founder of PitchLink, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform where our mission is to make buying easy. Welcome to Bits About Books. Thank you for your time and for joining us in this session. I have a favor to ask. While you continue to listen to the podcast, please leave a comment or rating at iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts from. I personally look at each comment and will give you a shout out to each of you in our following episodes. It means a lot to hear from you. Our guest today is Peter Cohan, and we speak with him about his new book, Doing Discovery, the single most important element of software sales and buyer enablement processes.
Actually, I've been reviewing some discovery calls just very, very recently. And what was sent to me as a discovery call, which was a 60-minute duration, the call lasted 60 minutes. Approximately 10 minutes of that call were actual discovery questions. The first part was just, the getting to know you portion. That was about 2 minutes. It was about 10 minutes of discovery questions. And then the salesperson launched into a corporate/product overview, and then he had a pre-sales resource with him. The pre-sales resource did about 20 to 25 minutes of what they referred to as introductory demo. And then that closed out the meeting. So at that total hour, they just skimmed the surface of the discovery lake. They never dipped into it. They never explored the depths. They never measured the circumference. All they did was touch their finger to the surface, move it around a little bit, and then withdraw it to go talking about their products, their services, all about the vendor. So I just see that over and over and over again. We got to change the way that people visualize discovery. We have to change the way that people actually execute discovery.
Peter Cohan is the founder and principal of Second Derivative and the author of The Great Demo and Doing Discovery methodologies focused on helping software organizations improve their sales and marketing results, primarily through improving organizations' discovery and demonstration skills. The bulk of his experience is with complex enterprise software and strategic systems sold to varied audiences in a range of vertical markets. He has enjoyed roles in technical and product marketing, marketing management, pre-sales and pre-sales management, sales and sales management, senior management, and the C-suite, as well as serving on boards of directors. He has executed and delivered thousands of discovery conversations and demos and has been on the receiving end of thousands of discovery calls and demos from a broad variety of vendors around the world, from startups to the world's biggest software vendors and verticals, from accounting to zymology. In August 22, he published Doing Discovery, a methodology providing a structured approach to discovery for B2B software vendors. Let's dive right into this session with Peter Cohan. Peter, welcome to Bits About Books. I'm delighted to have you back. I remember how much I enjoyed my last conversation, and it's so nice that I'm able to talk to you as you publish your new book.
It was a delightful conversation last time, and I'm looking forward to this one as well.
Peter, I wonder the fundamentals of sales, which is defining your customer, what we call ICP, understanding them, then understanding the process of discovery, which is not just a step so that you can quickly go to demo and then quickly finish your sales. Why is it that so little attention is paid to the fundamentals?
That is an intriguing question, and probably is the answer to the question, why did I write this book in the first place? There's at least three contributing factors to explore here. One is where sales methodologies begin and end. Number two has to do with what people know and what they don't know. And number three, I think, has to do with some of the changing elements of the marketplace. So which of those three would you like to start with?
I will like to start with even before that. When did you decide that it's time to write this book, and what happened there?
So I decided to start. When did I decide to write this book? Probably as long ago as about 7 years, but it's taken me a while to do the combination of actually pulling the trigger and getting it done, and completing, if you will, the practices and testing them out to really make sure that what I was going to put onto paper or virtual paper really is an approach that is going to be highly successful for people. So it did start about 7 years ago. I started actually drafting material probably 3 or 4 years ago. But a lot of this has simply been refinement, testing, executing, testing with organizations, with trainees, to really make sure that this was going to be an effective approach. I put virtual pen to virtual paper in November and December, and I actually finished, I think, drafting everything towards the end of January, and then entered that long, painful portion of actually producing the book, getting it proofed, rolling it out to people to get their feedback, making changes, and we released the paperback version on August 5th, just a week and a half ago, and the Kindle version followed rather crisply on August 11th. So there you are.
Oh, that's a great, very specific and precise countdown. I'll still stick with that for a bit. Great Demo was a sort of a watershed moment in sales books, I would say, because it really hit upon a fundamental part of the process, which was, for the lack of a better word, broken or misunderstood. And I think you're flipping it in simple terms, just flipping that process made it completely understandable. I'm obviously talking in very simplistic terms because I would like people to go and read the book and also listen to what we discussed last time. But on a more serious note, when you started thinking about it 7 years back, and when you actually started putting it together and starting to create this framework, which you were testing, by the way, with your trainees, what were you actually seeing, and what were those triggers?
Let me answer this in the form of a great story. So I was having a conversation with a head of sales, a CRO, Chief Revenue Officer, a number of years ago, and we were moderately deep into the conversation. And at one point, I asked him, I said, "What percent of your salespeople would you say are skilled at doing discovery, are sufficiently skilled at doing discovery?" And he says 80%. Excuse me. He says 20%. And I thought about that for a moment, and then I jokingly and seriously said, "What percent of your sales folks think they do a good job with discovery, but you know they actually don't?" He says, "Hang on, let me close my door," which is a wonderful thing. And I hear this ka-chunk sound, and then he comes back and he says, "I'd say that a good 80% of that remaining population believe they do a good job in discovery, but I know they actually don't." And to give an example, that I was reviewing, actually I've been reviewing some discovery calls just very, very recently of the Gong recordings and so forth. And what was sent to me as a discovery call, which was a 60-minute duration, the call lasted 60 minutes. Approximately 10 minutes of that call were actual discovery questions. The first part was just, the getting to know you portion. That was about 2 minutes. It was about 10 minutes of discovery questions. And then what do you think the balance of that 48 minutes comprised?
The salesperson talking about the product.
You got it. The salesperson launched into a corporate/product overview, and then he had a pre-sales resource with him. The pre-sales resource did about 20 to 25 minutes of what they referred to as introductory demo, and then that closed out the meeting. So at that total hour, they just skimmed the surface of the discovery lake. They never dipped into it. They never explored the depths. They never measured the circumference. All they did was touch their finger to the surface move it around a little bit, and then withdraw it to go talking about their products, their services, all about the vendor. That's one of the contributing factors. I just see that over and over and over again that caused me to say, you know what, we have to write this book. Or I should say, I have to write this book. We have to get it published. We got to change the way that people visualize discovery. We have to change the way that people actually execute discovery.
I can totally see this. And in fact, it would be great if we did another chat about why it is so, because I think it's such an important point. Why is it people who are in the profession doing this over and over in the name of discovery?
Yeah. And I think there's, as I said, there's several contributing factors here. One of the first ones has to do with sales methodology training, which tends to tell you what information needs to be captured. So, for example, Medic and MedPick are good examples of sales methodologies where people are told, here's the information you need to capture to feel that you have a qualified lead or you have completed discovery. What they fail to do in the sales methodology training sessions is address two other major questions. Number one, why should you or do you need to collect this information? And number two, how to actually execute that process. So doing discovery as a book really is designed to, in a certain sense, pick up where sales methodology training stops and answer the question, okay, well, why is doing discovery so important? What are we trying, what is the rationale for doing it? And then what are the specific pieces of information you need and should collect? And then how do you actually execute it? And it's the how that has truly been missing in the industry. It's taught anecdotally. It's taught by ride-alongs by one new person with a more seasoned veteran. And so what you have is a system that is really based on, it's just based on nothing structured. So this was an attempt, and hopefully a good attempt, to provide a structured approach to the why, the what, and the how of doing discovery. How's that?
That's great. Again, I just want to dig a bit before we go to the book. When you started observing this, like your last book, when you were observing the demo process and you said that something is broken here, and this is what is broken. So it observation followed by analysis followed by coming up with a prescriptive solution.
Mm-hmm.
What were you seeing was wrong? I mean, what you just just told was a demonstration of what was wrong. But what was it that you figured needs fixing? Is it the understanding? Is it the approach? Is it the training? Where was it?
It's really very simple. It's the lack of understanding of what discovery actually is. Let me give two sets of examples here. We've delivered hundreds of great demo workshops over the years, now almost approaching 20 years of delivering great demo training. And in the course of workshops, we touch on some of the key elements of discovery information that needs to be captured in order to put together and deliver a credible and successful demonstration. In those workshops, we also touch on how to collect some of that information. But what we really recognize and what our customers recognize is that in a certain way, we've been operating backwards. So we've been teaching people how to do better demos. We've been teaching them demonstration skills with an assumption that they also know how to get the discovery information that is required or necessary to produce those demos. But over and over and over again, we would see people struggle through the process of actually collecting that information, and we would go back and then begin to provide the discovery skills training on how to actually get that information so they can deliver the demo. So that was data point number one. Data point number two, I and the team will watch probably hundreds of recordings of demos and now more and more discovery conversations with our prospects as a process of getting ready for any type of a workshop. So we'll typically say, hey, send me a couple examples of some of your best performers doing discovery and demos and a couple examples of some average performers so we can actually take a look at a spectrum. And what I would see over and over and over with the demos is that there was either no discovery done or it was so little as to be laughable. And then, as I just referenced, this discovery call example was, 1/6, 10 minutes out of 60, 1/6 of the call was actual discovery. The rest was all the vendor doing their traditional blah, blah, blah. So those were key indicators that there needs to be a change. People don't know what they don't know about discovery. And that then precipitated the training sessions, which then precipitated the book.
Right, right. So was there something that you were jotting down as this is going on? What was your process? Were you writing blog posts around what you were watching? Or was it something like which was going into your back of your head saying, no, I think these are the things which need to be sort of, elaborated or thought of?
Well, this goes back a long ways. So it is, we'll set the stage. It's 1992. I'm working and living in Basel, Switzerland, working for a software company that makes software for the pharmaceutical research industry. And I would get on a tram in town and go visit three of the world's biggest pharmaceutical companies. And when I would come back from some of these visits with customers, would sit down with our head of sales, a very, very wise guy, Hans-Rudi Kottmann, and he would ask me questions about what I learned. And at the end of almost all of these conversations, they were all, sales strategy conversations. He would say, and I love this phrase, he would say, we need more information. And then we begin to detail exactly what we needed. And as I went through this process and then went into my own direct sales role in the western half of the United States, selling to biotechs, I learned something very, very interesting. And that is the assumptions of salespeople about prospect needs and wants are exactly that. They're assumptions. And even if you're right, you can be wrong. And let me explain what I mean by that. We had offerings that were very, very well suited for our prospects. However, we needed, it was a mix and match type of a thing. We had a series of data sources, and we needed to be able to propose and suggest to our prospects, here are the 5 data sources you need. You don't need these other 3 over here, but these 2, in fact, are critical, and the other 3 I strongly recommend. Well, in order to do that, we really needed to understand their businesses rather intimately. And biotechs are a very interesting entity because each of them has their secret sauce of what makes them unique, what makes them special, what gives them competitive strengths in the marketplace. And the one thing they wanted you to ask them was, tell me about what makes you special as a biotech. And if you offered that question, they would get excited. They would get up in front of a whiteboard. They'd teach you all about their science. They would talk and talk and talk. What a delight. And what I learned from this was I needed to have a plan. Doing discovery, I needed to have a structured approach so that I could make sure that I went through the information pieces that I needed to capture to be able to propose a solution that was really a best fit for each of those individual biotechs. That process turned into a discovery document, which effectively was a collection of prompts, short words or word phrases that would remind me in the conversation to ask them about X, Y, or Z. And as I went through my discovery conversations with these folks, and I filled out these documents effectively by answering my own prompts in the form of questions to the prospects, I realized that this approach was extraordinarily successful in making the prospects feel that I had understood them sufficiently to be able to provide the kind of proposals and suggestions that fit them very, very well. And for me to know that I had done exactly the same thing, that I had collected enough information to be in a position where I could actually propose precise solutions. So that discovery document concept is something that I began to evolve as I went from company to company and then founded the great demo business. And that's what then led to, if you will, the structured approach that we then taught in workshops and finally led to the book, which is based on exactly that same idea. you got to know where you're going if you're going to expect to get to your destination.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is a great point to dive into the book and dive back where we sort of started this conversation, which is why is it so little is focused on the fundamentals of sales?
Or the fundamentals of discovery in sales. I don't know. I spent quite a bit of time looking through, the world of Amazon to see what else was out there in discovery. And as I said, sales methodologies touch on it. They will often say, here's information you need to collect at a very, very high level. Words like, what's the impact? What's the value? But rarely, if ever, did they actually articulate methods of getting that information and how to do it. That's what really, again, that was one of the major driving forces for writing the book. Let me share with you, this is kind of fun. When I'm working now with audiences, I've laid out 7 levels of discovery skills. And one of the most enjoyable things to do is to share those 7 levels with people and ask, where do you think you and your teams are? And the answers for most people are somewhere around levels 2 through 4 out of 7 levels, which tells you the size of the gap. And it's a huge gap. I'll give you a small but very, very important example. How often do you think vendors actually uncover tangible numbers for value?
My gut level feeling is it will be something around 10 to 15%, but I don't know.
I think you're right. You're right about in the range. I listened to dozens and dozens of discovery conversations. It's probably 5 to 10% where even the topic comes up, and fewer where tangible, concrete numbers are actually uncovered and used. And that to me is just, it's frightening, because the lack of that information, the lack of value information that the prospect can use to sell internally is probably one of the most debilitating aspects of insufficient discovery. Does that all resonate?
Absolutely, and let's elaborate on this. Obviously, I'm sure a part of the answer of how to do it is in the book, and is part of your framework. Let's connect this to that, and let's explore where it takes us.
Yeah. Well, let's do it this way. Let's say that you are a doctor, and a patient comes to you, and I'm a patient. I come to you and I say, I've got a pain in my side and it hurts. All right, what would you expect a good doctor to do at this point? Let's do it the other way. What would you expect a bad doctor to do at this point? I say, I've got a pain in my side and it hurts. What would a bad doctor do?
He will write a name of a pill and said, why don't you take this? This should fix it in 3 days. If not, come back to me.
Fix it in 3 days, right? Well, or worse, the doctor says, "Oh, let's get you into surgery right away and open you up and take a look." Well, that's known in the world of medicine. That's known as malpractice, right?
Yeah.
Well, a good doctor is going to start asking some questions. So, how long have you had that? And it's interesting the kinds of questions they start off with. So they'll ask questions like, how long have you had the pain? Where is it? Give me the dimensions. Is it deep? Is it constant? Does it throb? Is it occasional? So what they're doing there is moving from level 1, which is uncovering a statement of pain, to level 2, which is exploring pain more deeply. So that's what a doctor does, and they do it naturally. The next level is basically understanding the impact of the pain. So if you're a doctor, somebody could have a pain and it's caused by gas in the gut or the bowel, and it's going to go away. Maybe it recurs because of eating habits or whatsoever, but does it impact anything? Maybe not. Conversely, it may be a pain that is, perhaps it's muscle-based or organ-based, and when the patient tries to raise his or her arm, it's too painful even to do so. Okay, now we've uncovered an impact statement. So it's keeping you from driving, it's keeping you from showering comfortably. Okay, this is looking more serious. So that's level 3, where we've we've uncovered the pain, we've explored it more deeply, and we're intrigued and interested in the impact that this pain has potentially on other related systems. So let me pause there and ask, is this all resonating?
Absolutely. It makes complete sense.
So number 4 is quantifying that pain. And this is something doctors will do. You've seen those charts of pain from, I don't notice at all to this is completely consuming my life and it's nothing but tears and pain. So they have a 10-point scale for people to identify how painful this is, either on a occasional basis where it spikes or on a steady basis. We need to do the same thing in the world of discovery with software. We need to quantify the pain in terms of time, people, and money that's associated with making the change or is holding them back. So that's level 4.
It's time for a short break. Stay with us. After the break,
today there's an enormous amount of discussion on how prospects come into the sales process way far into their process. Some people will say, I don't know what it ever is, 50%, 70%, 57%. However, prospects don't know what they don't know. And to give you an example of that, they may do a ton of research on the web for a particular set of offerings. But if they haven't had a conversation with a vendor, it's highly unlikely that they know all the nuances or they've been exposed to all the kinds of capabilities that are possible. After all, most vendors don't reveal all the capabilities that are available, particularly in complex software, publicly, because it's a competitive differentiator. They don't want people to copy and on and on. So only through a conversation with a vendor, can the vendor determine whether or not the prospect even knows what all is possible with the offering.
You are listening to a Business Podcast Network original. Podcasting is the fastest growing content marketing opportunity, which is untapped. We can help you craft your audio strategy and help leverage the wide reach and easy streaming capability that the smartphone penetration provides. It is easy, it is powerful and personal. Talk to us to find out how podcasting can help you build your brand and reach out to your targets like never before. Write to us at bpn@bizcast.in. That is bpn@bizcast.in. Business Podcast Network. Podcasts end to end. Welcome back. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host for Bits About Books and founder of PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. Let's dive right back into the episode where we left it.
Level 5 is an interesting one, and I'm not sure that it applies to the world of medicine. It's called re-engineering vision re-engineering. And this has to do with, this is actually a very interesting subtopic. Today, there's an enormous amount of discussion on how prospects come into the sales process, which frankly is a buying process, but that's enough topic for another whole book. But prospects come to the sales process way far into their process. Some people will say, I don't know what it ever is, 50%, 70%, 57%. However, prospects don't know what they don't know. And to give you an example of that, they may do a ton of research on the web for a particular set of offerings. But if they haven't had a conversation with a vendor, it's highly unlikely that they know all the nuances or they've been exposed to all the kinds of capabilities that are possible. After all, most vendors don't reveal all the capabilities that are available, particularly in complex software, publicly, because it's a competitive differentiator. They don't want people to copy and on and on. So only through a conversation with a vendor, can the vendor determine whether or not the prospect even knows what all is possible with the offering. Vision re-engineering is a process of helping the prospect realize that more or different ways might be possible, solving a problem, accomplishing a task, getting an alert whatsoever. Would you like a small example of this?
Yes, of course.
So imagine that you are trying to manage you've been basically running a CRM system using Excel. Okay, so you're managing your forecast, you're managing your pipeline, you're managing your key deals using Excel, which a lot of us have done over the years. And you suddenly realize, you know what, Excel there's too many errors, it's a manual process, I don't have insight into important things I'd like to have insight to. So you reach out to a vendor, and the vendor, in a good vendor scenario, asks questions about what's going on today, how are you tracking this information, and so on. The vendor says, so you're using Excel, I see. How important is it, the vendor asks, for you to be able to get easy access into each individual critical deal for this quarter and the pipeline for the next, to see where those deals are, what's the status, what steps have been executed, and so forth. And the prospect says it's very important. It's something that I have to do manually today. I have to actually go and call up the reps and ask. Well, the vendor realizes that the prospect has no idea that in a tool like Zoho or HubSpot or Salesforce or whatsoever, all you'd need to do is click and drill down a couple of levels to access that information. If they've never seen that was possible, they don't know they don't know what they don't know. They don't know that it's available. Vision re-engineering then is the process of saying, dear Mr. Prospect, would it be interesting or useful if you had the capability to, right from a summary screen, click on an individual deal, drill down to see exactly what sales stages have been completed, what were the action items that are still open, what were the last conversations. Prospect says, wow, I had no idea that was possible. The vendor says, well, we have that capability. Would you like for us to include it in the demo? Prospect says, yes, please. What you've just done is re-engineered that prospect's vision to include that particular capability. And the wise vendor will seek out opportunities to re-engineer vision where they have competitive strengths, in particular over their competition. So that's vision re-engineering. If you will, is level 5. Very few people even understand that concept, and even fewer are actually skilled at doing it. So let me just pause there and see how that resonates.
Yeah, this is great. And as you are speaking, and I'm thinking of actual scenarios which you are talking of, I can see how this will get diluted and get pushed into that discovery call where 50 minutes the pre-sales guys will come and start showing it around. So I can totally see how the nuanced value will be completely destroyed in a normal process.
Yeah, and this is but wait, there's more. I cannot tell you how many organizations use discovery on the fly as an attempted replacement for doing real discovery. Discovery on the fly could be defined as, I'm going to show you a demo, and as I go through the demo, I will occasionally ask you, is this something that looks interesting to you? And how do you do this today? That is the typical mode of doing discovery on the fly. And discovery on the fly has its place, but there are several major risks, which we could go into, and this is pulling some ideas right out of the book. Should we explore this?
Absolutely.
So discovery on the fly, number one, the single biggest risk is buying it back. Buying it back is where you are presenting capabilities in your offering. You're showing the prospect capabilities from your offering that they don't feel they need. And the more capabilities that you show them that they don't feel they need, the more likely when it's time to negotiate that license agreement and that price, they're going to say what?
Okay, no need of these stuff. Why don't we bring the price down? Yeah,
exactly. We're not going to use those capabilities, so we don't want to pay for them. Now, this is a really weird thing about software because everybody is comfortable with the idea that there are capabilities that we will never use. But when you flog the prospect with them and show them, that's when they begin to rebel and say, I don't want to pay for that stuff. So buying it back is the phrase. And that's one of the key risks of discovery on the fly. The second is that you're bound to the software. It's very difficult to take the conversation to all the other areas of the discovery space that really need to be explored. So while you're looking at the detailed screen and software, what happens is you get pulled into the weeds in the conversation. The prospect says, hey, I notice you've got a color palette there. Can that color palette be changed? Okay, great. You're going to spend the next 5 minutes talking about changing the colors for that particular element. What you should have been talking about is impact, related pains, other environment, cultural attributes. None of that stuff can be explored when you're stuck looking at the software. So discovery on the fly has its uses, if you will, but it should be used cautiously. And vision generation demos are one of the areas where that could be used in a very, very structured way. Anyway, so that's where vision reengineering can help come in. Instead of doing discovery on the fly, do discovery for real.
Absolutely. So we are in level 5, right?
Correct. We're level 5. So level 6 is, so everything up through level 5 is making the assumption that your audience, your prospects are fairly homogeneous, and they're not. They're absolutely not. And just to give you 2 examples, if we look at the technology adoption curve and the nature of prospects as individuals or as organizations at different points of the technology adoption curve, you've got wildly varying cultures and wildly varying types of people you have to deal with respect to discovery. So, for example, technology, the innovator side of the curve, or early adopters. Let's talk about early adopters. Early adopters are early adopters because they want a competitive advantage. They're willing to accept a fair amount of risk to be first or to be a fast follower. And discovery for them needs to be couched with those kinds of outcomes in mind. Which means you've got to be very, very careful with the early adopter about a planned implementation, value realization events, and how this thing is going to go forward effectively. Now, conversely, if you're talking to early majority prospects, they recognize they need to make a change. They want to be cautious. They want to do it well. This is where discovery in its richest form needs to take place. As you move further and further to the right, you get to the late majority. You're going to be doing a lot more discovery in terms of understanding their cultures, understanding their internal methods of how they want to adapt, how they want to change, implementation pathways, and so forth. That's one angle, if you will, is the technology adoption curve. A second example that I love to offer are burn victims. So burn victims being people or organizations for whom an implementation did not go well. So remember the days of Siebel?
Yeah.
So if I recall correctly, Siebel was probably the first big, for the audience, the first big and major success with CRM systems. However, their implementations were about as heavy and thick as one could ever imagine. And there were numerous businesses that would, in a virtual sense, follow Siebel salespeople around to clean up the messes of implementation. Many, many burn victims. Siebel implementations that took too long, they went over cost, they didn't yield the results that were wanted. Well, those people and those organizations are burn victims. And if you encounter a burn victim, there are specific things one needs to do in discovery before you'll ever make any progress towards a sale. They need to feel that you have heard and understood what happened previously in excellent detail to make sure that same pathway doesn't get tread again in the future. So burn victims are another example of, if you will, level 6, wherein you're applying these skills and these processes, this discovery methodology to the broad range of different types of scenarios that you could expect to encounter in an industry. And those 2 parameters, technology adoption curve positions, if you will, and burn victims are perfect examples of where that applies.
Right. And how many organizations where you are doing training do you see actually operating at this level?
Very. So now we're talking about the 1 in 1,000. I mean, we literally
Yeah.
are. There are. What's really interesting. Some of the world's best salespeople are best because they're naturals at doing discovery. And if you ask them to tell others how they do it and what they're doing and why they do it, they would probably say something like, "I can't. I just do it. I just execute it. I can't tell you what I'm doing. I just know this is the right way to go." These people are natural doctors. They would be good in any industry where you need to understand somebody's situation. They would be the world's best waiters in restaurants, for example. They would be the world's best doctors. They're the best consultative salespeople. But they're literally, there's probably higher numbers than this, but I would say they're probably literally 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000. What's your experience? These are the eagles, the naturals.
Yeah, I mean it's very rare actually. I mean and it'll be like very for the lack of a better word, stupid to think that your entire team can behave like that.
Yeah. And asking those people, the naturals, to try to train others is just it's an impossibility because they don't know, they cannot articulate what they're doing. They just know, they just do it. So, doing discovery as a book to a certain degree is taking those experiences and putting it into a structured approach that people can then follow, that all of us can then follow.
Right. And that brings us to level 7. Is that where we summit?
I hope we summit, and yet at the same time, I suspect that there are other mountains that are even higher. But level 7 is I define level 7 as doing discovery as a methodology. And by methodology, I mean something where you have an integrated set of skills. So here's one way of looking at it. Building a house, building a structure requires a broad range of skills. There's plumbers, there's masons, there's people pouring concrete, there's people doing siding, putting in wallboard, painting, glass, and so forth. Each of those subdisciplines has a set of skills associated with it. I'm always amazed to watch, how people lay concrete. It's absolutely fascinating to me, and it's something that I do not know how to do. Methodology tells you when and how to apply these sets of skills. So, for example, imagine if somebody built a house by starting with the roof. Well, that's going to be kind of tough because there's no walls in place. And similarly, what if you put up the walls before you built the foundation? Or what if you poured the concrete before you actually put in the plumbing, the electrical? Methodology provides you with an integrated, cohesive approach in terms of timing, when to apply which skills at what point, and related. Methodology enables enablement. Let me say that again differently. And methodology enables somebody to be able to understand what actions need to take place in what order, and then how to coach people to achieve high levels of performance. So that's what I mean by methodology enables enablement. It enables enablement folks to say, okay, these guys are really, really strong, or this person's particularly strong in uncovering pain. This person is very, very strong in actually getting impact statements and mapping that out. Neither of them are particularly strong in uncovering value. Let's help these people focus on uncovering value to help them help their prospects move their deals forward, for example. So operating as a methodology where you've got a broad set of skills that you can put into play with the right timing, the right order, and with the knowledge of what needs to happen in order to complete, if you will, the discovery document, discovery picture. Does that help?
Yeah. So as you're speaking, I'm thinking that what you're literally describing is what we in other contexts talk about mental models, right?
Yeah, exactly that.
So it is just resonating with me in that form that you get a framework and you apply it, and when you look through that framework, you know where you are, and at that point what you need to do. And of course those nuances, like some people will be better at some stage and so on. So how do you sort of bring in multiple multiple capabilities. I don't want to use, I'm very tempted, but don't want to say multiple intelligences, but it's really, that's what it is.
Skills and skill sets. Yeah.
Exactly. And how do you sort of combine those into an output for a given account or a given customer?
Yeah, I think the analogy of building a house and a contractor is a really, really good one. A contractor, a skilled contractor, probably knows each of the individual sets of skills at a reasonable level. Contractor has probably done many of those. They know how to saw, they know how to hammer, they know how to paint, they know how to put in drywall, they know how to plumb. What the contractor knows, however, that's most important is the ordering of each of these sets of skills. It would be a disaster to engage the painters before you have the drywall in, for example. Then you're painting wood walls or wood framing, and that's it. So methodology, again, is taking all these skills and aligning them, placing them in the right context, executing them at the right timing, and related.
So, Peter, I have a question. When we spoke about the great demo, the book and the methodology there, I could see pretty much any company using those ideas. When I say any company, I mean the size and the nature of the product, independent of the complexity of what they do, right? Is this book applicable to more large enterprises selling more complex products? What's your thought?
So I would say, generally speaking, yes. However, everything else being equal, the vendor that is perceived as doing a better job with discovery is in a competitively advantageous position. Now, I want to make I'm actually doing a talk in a couple of weeks here where I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more detail. But you can think in terms of two types of buying. Buying of tools versus buying of solutions. Yeah. For example, when I was back with another organization, I had a team of engineers that reported to me. I didn't know their jobs at all. They came to me and said, "We need a CAD tool for us to do our jobs." And they specifically said, "We want SolidWorks." I went, "Great." And I went out and I bought 20 copies of SolidWorks. And all I was interested in terms of the conversation with the rep was to get the best deal and to know I was buying the right thing. That was it. I had basically been told by my team, "Hey, Cohan, we need 20 copies of SolidWorks. You're the boss. Can you go out and buy it for us?" And I said, "Absolutely." So buying tools, stuff that's going to sit on your laptop, things that are comparatively low cost, that does not, generally speaking, require any substantial discovery if you already know what you want and how to go about getting it. As you do get more complex, this is where more and more of the discovery principles apply. Now, that being said, I have a specific chapter or section of the book where I talk about doing discovery for transactional sales processes. So the interesting thing here is that for many software vendors, they'll have their smallest deals. They may call them mid-market. They may call them SMB. SMB is fairly typical. And those deals for the vendor might be $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, annual revenues, for example. However, and as a result, the vendor looks at that as, a small deal. We give our junior level salespeople execute these deals. And it's a small portion, but it's as an aggregate, it's important for the business. We need to cover it. What's interesting to me is the perception of the prospects, because for many of these prospects, if they're buying, for example, an ERP system or something that they're going to hang their entire business off, it's only $20,000 a year for the vendor, but it's $20,000 a year for the prospect. That's a huge piece of their budget. And if this doesn't work, it could mean the end of their business. So there's this huge disconnect in many cases between traditional SMB sales teams and the prospects' perceptions of how important this is. So one of the topics in the book is how to apply many of this discovery methodology for scenarios where you're selling what for you is a low-priced offering, but your prospect sees it as a key component and a critical, important component for their businesses.
Yeah, I can totally see, because like you described, I mean, if you're doing an impact assessment, you should be able to figure that out, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I was one of my long-term customers is somebody that does what you might call he has software for non-standard lending. It's a very interesting marketplace. And his customers, when they buy into his offering, they're hanging their futures on the success or failure of his offering in their hands. And his sales are anywhere from about $20,000 to $100,000 a year for his prospects. They agonize. His prospects agonize over, pursuing this as a solution, because they know that if it goes poorly, it likely is the end of their businesses. So this is a huge issue. But to generally answer your question, I would say the more complex you're offering, the less product-led it is, the more you really need to dive into doing discovery.
I totally agree. How do you prepare well with the questions that you want to ask at each of these stages? I mean, obviously it will be different for different companies and possibly different for different kinds of prospects that you're talking to.
Yeah, so very, very simply, two sets of things. Number one, you got to know where you're going to go. And by that, I mean, you need to have a discovery document, something that tells you, here are the questions or the topics you need to cover, not necessarily the questions you need to ask, but the topics you need to cover in your discovery conversation to know that you've gotten a sufficient amount of information, and so your prospect feels that they've been heard adequately. So number one is knowing what the destination looks like, what a completed discovery document should look like. And then number two is actually the process of and the timing and flow of asking those questions. And let me give you a small example of this. With the exception of most executives, middle managers, or I'd say managers, middle managers and below, are generally uncomfortable talking about their major pain in depth at the beginning of a conversation. And to a certain degree, I liken this. Let's go back to our doctor example, because you don't go directly from your car into a meeting with a doctor. There are several intermediary steps that kind of move you emotionally into the process where you're actually comfortable admitting pain and talking about it openly.
Yeah.
So when you go to a doctor's office, the first thing they make you do, if it isn't an online system today, is they make you fill out those terrible forms of your history. Are you on any medication? Anything else going on? Any et cetera, et cetera. And it's often thick forms, 2 or 3 or 4 pages that you have to fill out. Well, guess what? That's demographic information that is easy to ask and easy to answer, and is designed to move this patient gently towards a more substantive conversation. And you fill out that form, you complete it, you hand it in, you still don't get to see the doctor right away. They take you to a nurse's station where the nurse takes your vitals. So they, open your mouth, we're going to take your temperature, we're going to take your blood pressure, we're going to weigh you. There may be 1 or 2 other things that you do. And again, demographics. These are things that are easy to assess and easy to report. And again, they're moving this patient towards the discussion about real pain. We can do, and we should do, and this is outlined in the methodology, the same type of things when we're having a discovery conversation with a prospect. We don't start off necessarily, again, with the exception of certain folks like executives, by asking about the pain, but instead, tell me about your team. How many folks? Where are they located? Tell me about the processes. All of these things are designed to get your prospect speaking comfortably and to begin to build a conversation relationship with you, the vendor, so that when you do begin to ask about pain, the prospect is willing, they're open, and they're sharing information richly, if you will, at that point. So that's part of what this book is laying out.
Bits About Books is brought to you by PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. PitchLink makes buying easy by enabling high-quality engagement between buyers and sellers through its presentation and discussion modules. Sellers create customized sales narratives using sales collaterals and personal videos and reach out to prospects through a non-intrusive, buyer-qualified engagement. PitchLink requires no installation or download and holds the entire repository of sales collaterals and buyer-seller conversations. Talk to us to know more about how you can engage with customers without intrusion. Call us on 99021 631 32.
When I speak to people and I talk to a lot of people in the sales space, as you would imagine, my observation is either people are lazy, so they'll take an idea but really not do the job that you're supposed to do with that idea. And most of the time when I look at frameworks and I talk about frameworks to people, that's what I see, that when you're applying it, you're not doing the nuanced stuff that actually adds the value. You're more in the mode of checking boxes.
You're absolutely correct. And, again, this is, I think, one of the critical differences between the naturals that we were talking about earlier and the average rep. The average rep is pretending to check boxes. Yeah, I did that. I got all that. I did discovery. I did 10 minutes of discovery in an hour conversation. Well, wait a minute. You did 10 minutes of discovery. What'd you use the rest of the time with? Oh, well, I told them about our company. I did the product overview, and then we did a demo. Oh, so you did 10 minutes of discovery in an hour call. Whereas the natural does an hour's worth of discovery in an hour's call, and yet still provides the quid pro quos that make the prospect feel like he or she is getting something in return during that same conversation. Yeah, this is people. That again is the part of the point behind this book, is to provide people with a structured approach, a template that they can begin to follow. And the smart people, just be blunt, the smart people are going to recognize that particularly for complex products, if you're in a marketplace where you've got multiple vendors, each with offerings that are considered to be, nuanced compared to one another, the vendor that is perceived by the prospect as doing a superior job in discovery is in a competitively advantageous position. And that's it. That is huge.
Yeah, I totally agree, because that's where, trust comes from respect, and respect comes from the feeling that, okay, this guy is actually understanding where I'm going.
Having been heard.
Absolutely. Peter, this was wonderful as expected. Thank you so much, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Pleasure was truly mine.
We have a fantastic lineup over the next couple of episodes with great conversations on breakthrough books. Subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you do not miss a single episode. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for being with us today on Bits About Books, where we talk to authors about breakthrough books on sales, marketing, and business. We hope this conversation helped inform and motivate as we all navigate a rapidly changing business environment. For us, these are enlightening conversations enriched with knowledge and expertise. We encourage you to go out and buy the book to learn firsthand and implement some of the great ideas we discussed today. We hope to have you with us again in the next exciting episode of Bits About Books. If you liked what you heard, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast platforms like iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast from, and give us a rating while you are at it.
This Bizcast original podcast is produced for PitchLink, the next generation buyer-seller engagement platform, where the mission is to make buying easy. Hosted by Subhanjan Sarkar and produced by Rajiv Aditya. See you next time and have a wonderful day.